Hello everyone, Floppy Waffle 69 here. In today's video, or for reviewing entertainment, I figured we would look at a oldie but a goodie in my opinion, the Tier 5 IGN heavy cruiser, the Furutaka, or the Furutako, as it's also known in game and around the community. Now why Tier 5? And why this ship, right? Well, first of all, Tier 5 I think is a crucial pivotal point in the learning process of this game. A lot of new players, in my opinion, in the first 1, 2, maybe 3 days make it to Tier 4, no problem, pretty easy to fly up the tiers. Once you do put in a little bit of time grinding, and this is again without boosters and all that kind of stuff, without grinding and premium time, you get to Tier 5. And Tier 5 is a big pivotal and a big learning curve in this game. And I feel like not a lot of community contributors, not a lot of content creators really go over Tier 5. And that's mainly due to low tiers more or less being dead in the essence that we don't get a whole lot of players playing them. There is still a strong community, I would say, of players who really enjoy these low tier, World War One, early World War II boats, including myself. I play the entire game up and down the tech tree. Even now and then, some of my div mates will go on to Tier 1 and we'll have a good time just to play and get rid of the top tier cancer that's flying and diving and sailing around. But why the Furutaka? Well, the Furutaka is one of two tech tree line for cruisers back in the day. You had the Japanese and you had the Americans. And in my opinion, this was the superior ship. I think this ship did a better job of teaching players how to play cruisers. And it was kind of the backbone in installing or stating the how to kite, how to do the kite maneuver when cruisers actually, sailing away, swiveling, slowing, adjusting speed, that kind of stuff. And that play style, I think the Japanese heavy cruiser is perfect because that play style carries all the way up to Tier 10 for the Zhao. A lot of other cruisers do try to mimic this, I believe, but I believe the Zhao, this line is just superior. I think it's a well done line. I do think the line could use some love. I know Lesta just added something I've been saying for years to my div mates and my clan mates about why don't they add a spotter plane on the Aoba, Mayoko, and Mogami especially, given the fact their range is just so, meh for their tier. And I think it would really benefit because they already have a catapult fighter. And sure enough, Lesta went ahead and did that. So I think that's a great change. I am crossing my fingers we get that for wargaming. I have my doubts, but, I can hope, right? But kind of going back to why I said, why tier 5? And, it's a pivotal point in learning the game. Well, as we know, the main thing that comes at Tier 5 is you get that +2 matchmaker, finally kind of thing, right? Finally is kind of not how I would describe it, but it's installed. Basically, you're leaving protected matchmaking. I, for one, am on the firm belief that +2, -2 matchmaker, especially at this point in the game, as far as it's come for 10 years coming up, is just not necessary anymore. And I know players will, get blue in the face saying, well, we don't have enough player count. We don't have enough player count. I know there's cross-server platform play. And every time, I queue up in ships, I'm in queue for sub 20, 30 seconds. If you're telling me that getting rid of +2, -2 matchmaker would maybe extend my wait time in queue by an average of 5 to 10 seconds, I'm all for it. Why? Because I want to get put in a game that I want to enjoy, where everyone else, all 24 players, will enjoy playing a game. If I'm a Furutaka fighting against Tier 6s, I'm okay with that. I don't mind that. If I'm a Furutaka fighting against Tier 7s, I'm not having an enjoyable experience. And we've seen this now with the every even tier, like for submarines and aircraft carriers having even tier matchmaker, or tech tree ships or whatever, like Tier 6, Tier 8, Tier 10, or just ships in general. Same with subs. It's really skewed the matchmaker in some aspects and elements, just because of the skipping a tier basically to the next ship, and the balance is really exacerbated. I feel like gotten worse just because you have to factor in such a wider variety and such a wider range of ships in order to think about balancing, right? The other reason is super ships. I think super ships has really just thrown a damper in the matchmaker, and I feel like Tier 9s are constantly thrown into super ship games, and that's just not fun for anyone. You've spent all this time, maybe potentially invested this money, grinding up to tier 9, and you're still fighting +2 into tier against super ships. I don't know. I don't really see a negative to going to a +1 -1 matchmaker, but keeping the +2 -2 matchmaker for me is just griefing low tier, middle tier players, tier Y players, right? So, but anyways, enough about that. I don't want to dwell on about that. That could be a whole different video that I put out sometime. But I want to talk about the Furutaka. The Furutaka, the Furutaka, the Furutaka. This is a awesome ship, guys. I cannot say enough about this particular boat. I think this boat is, again, installing core cruiser gameplay 101. And this transfers, if you master the Furutaka, it'll inevitably master the Aoba, the Mayoko, the Mogami, the Ibuki, and inevitably the Zao. Like, I remember when I first got the Zao, it was kind of a shock for me because I had those triple turrets and the shell velocity was so great. No, back then at least, that I was actually missing a lot of my shells because I was trying to lead appropriately for mid floaty shells. I mean, not American floaty, but Japanese floaty, which is still great shell arcs. So again, that could happen to you too if you're starting off the game. But we don't need to talk about any tiers above tier 5 here or the Furutaka. Let's just get back to talking about the Furutaka. So we're going to go through her, go through some specs. Obviously, I have a captain on her. I'm going to go ahead and remove the captain. I do have the upgrades mounted on the ship, but I will be reading off of a separate list that I have compiled just so that we don't get those upgraded stats conflicted or inflated, right, for you guys. So anyways, let's get into it and let's get into the review. And the first thing I want to talk about is the armor layout of the Furutaka. And you are already seeing right off the get-go, the armor on this thing is honestly amazing. I honestly believe it's the best tier 5 cruiser when it comes to armor. Yes, you still retain the 13mm nose. And yes, you still retain the 13mm aft end, or but you pick up this 48mm deck armor. And this is awesome. Potentially shattering HE, ricocheting battleships, not having the ability to be overmatched through the deck. I mean, it really does allow you to be a little bit more aggressive with the Furutaka, at least in my opinion, if angled right. And especially in the kited position with this thing, forget about it. Like, I mean, yes, absolutely, this thing can still get citadeled. I'm not saying this thing cannot get citadeled, don't get me wrong. And when I say it has good armor, like, it's only as good as the player sailing it, because you're going to still have to utilize the angle. Like, the citadel sits well above the waterline, as you can see. I mean, more than halfway up the ship. I mean, we're not talking Omaha levels here, but pretty damn close. But then again, the Omaha sits above water way higher or way more than the Furutaka, as the Furutaka sits lower and it's a little more sleek looking. And that does play a role. That will play a role in your, I guess, gaming experience with this ship. So, typical superstructure, same, 13mm, whatever. So, again, nothing to, or 10mm, excuse me, nothing to, again, write home about with the ship when it comes to that. So, but we want to go over to the survivability of the Furutaka, which is awesome. I think 32,250. I believe I have the signals mounted too. Which, so if you're going down to just raw stats of the ship, you're clocking in at that 30,700 for your health. So this is obviously because of upgrades or whatever are in signal flags. So base health 30,700 on this thing with a torpedo protection of 4%. Is it noticeable? I don't really know. Probably not, but you do have it at your disposal. But more or less, with that torpedo protection, you do have those torpedo bulges, which will help. I believe they do act as like microscopic, at least in the game-wise, spaced armor. So that will help, alleviate some mitigation or add to damage mitigation if you are caught broadside, or sometimes you'll get torpedo protection shatters or whatnot on cruisers. Like, it does play a role. Don't think it doesn't. Okay, we're going to go over some stats with the artillery. Obviously, this is the upgraded version. Stock, I believe you have 200mm guns. With the upgraded version, you have 203mm guns. 3x2 turn arrangement. AP DPM coming in at 112,800, and an HE DPM coming in just under 80,000 with 79,200. That is pretty if you ask me. The AP DPM, not terrible, but like the HE DPM, these are not fast-firing guns, and you're going to see that here with a reload of 15 seconds. So you're going to be more of a opportunist, picking your shots, showing great marksmanship. Your damage over time will stack up, but your raw DPS is not going to be great just because of the slow reload. 180-degree turret traverse, clocking in at 30 seconds, pretty standard. Horizontal dispersion and vertical dispersion of 105 meter for the horizontal and a vertical dispersion of 60 meters with a Sigma of 2.0. This is awesome, guys. This is very, very good, very, very potent. You will find, I mean, yes, you only have 6 shells slinging down range, but I do find myself more often than not landing with at least a minimum of 3 shells on target. And I do consider myself to have decent aim in this game. So this ship will really bring out the best of your marksmanship. If you can aim, you will land your shells, and you're going to see that throughout the entire line as well. But yeah, and with the 203 millimeter guns now, you do have the 14 millimeter overmatch, which I believe some cruisers in this game will have, especially if you're fighting tier 4s. You could go right through their nose, right? But I know a big meme thing that a lot of people have seen with like the Furutaka is that it actually has the ability to overmatch itself. So you do see, I mean, that was a thing back in the day, and it still is a thing. Just keep that in mind. 14 millimeters of overmatch with standard tier 5 cruisers having around 13 millimeters of nose plating. So not bad. You do have a high fire chance, and this is again is something you're going to have throughout down the line. 19% fire chance. I believe I do have signals on that, bringing it up. So your standard is going to be 17. With the captain skills and signals, you can get up to 19, I believe. And damage coming in at 3,300, which is awesome. And you're averaging about 4.1 fires per minute based upon that on this. So the HE is extremely potent on this ship. Destroyers do not want to get hit by this thing. Cruisers do not want to get hit with this thing. Battleships do not want to get hit with this HE. This HE is very, very potent, very strong. They will 100% be feeling this HE, especially when your salvo weight becomes heavier and heavier and heavier as you climb the tiers. Even with 6 guns of HE, if you even land 4 of those, your broken engine, broken rudder, breaking modules on destroyers, incapacitating them, you name it, especially at low tier, a lot of captains don't have last stand, and destroyers at that point are dead in the water unless they have a smoke screen. So just something to consider. Secondaries, you have them. I wouldn't really write home about them. You do have the 4x1 120 millimeters. They're there. Again, if there's like a low HP sub on the surface or a destroyer with like less than 200 HP, like yeah, and maybe the occasional fire starting, they're not going to win any awards here. Penetrating 20 millimeters of armor because they are 120 millimeters. But main battery range again of 13.9. This is, in my opinion, relatively short. There are some shorter, but this is pretty much almost near the bottom of the barrel, and I think it's just to compensate for having 203 millimeter guns. So, but again, completely playable if you play it the right ways in the right scenarios. Going over to torpedo tubes, 2x4 610 millimeter launchers. Takes about 180 degree turn time, around 6 seconds for that, and your torpedo tube reload time clocking in at 94 seconds. Base speed of 59 knots. These torps have a detectability of 1.5 kilometers when they're incoming on a ship, so that gives the opposing ship about a 9.5 second reaction time. And these torpedoes do have a range of 10 kilometers, damage clocking in around 16,267. Pretty potent torps. I know that for the wild, the Furutaka at tier 5 held the record for the longest torpedo range for a cruiser. So I don't know what it is now. I think it's like, I know the Yahagi has 12, and I'm not sure if there's anything higher than that. But these are still very usable torps. And you're going to tell by the torpedo firing angles that I'll put up on screen later on. The torpedo firing angles on this thing are great. These are more mid ship, so you're going to have the better firing angles on those, whereas as you climb up the tiers, these torpedo tubes move slower and slower and slowly back to the rear of the ship, and eventually go in within the hull to give you a little bit of armor protection, but the firing angles are going to be not so good when you climb up the tiers, and you'll see that. I know the Zao got buffed with them, so they have a little bit better, but still I wouldn't say they're anything to write home about. Has a depth charge airstrikes. AA defense is relatively garbage. Tier 6 aircraft carriers are going to have their way with you. They're going to have to fly in your aura for a while to shoot down planes. So really wouldn't count on this thing when it comes in regards to AA at all. And the maneuverability of this ship is actually not terrible. I found that it to be relatively maneuverable. So I mean, with a maximum speed clocking in, I don't believe this is right on my screen because I have flags or whatnot. So the max speed actually is 34.5 knots. With a rudder shift time of 5.7 seconds and a turning circle radius of 170, or yeah, sorry, my bad, 750 meters. Yeah, I mean, I find it to be fairly maneuverable. I mean, I know there's going to be other cruisers, light cruisers, right, that are going to be able to, zoom around and do all this stuff. But I mean, 5.7 is not bad. I'd say turning circle radius 750 meters. I mean, that's okay. But rudder shift of 5.7 is definitely not terrible. So. And then kind of a thing that you're going to see here with the Furutaka of the concealment values of this ship. 11.9 kilometers sea detection. Obviously by the air it's 5.8 because that's as long as its AA aura is. And I believe the smoke firing penalty, if you happen to sail in smoke, whatever, is 6.9 kilometers. Good thing to write home about is that with the captain build, with concealment expert on this thing, you do get it down to 10.7 kilometers, which is, again, super nice to see. But then with the captain build as well, you're also going to get down your air detect to 5.2. 5.2 kilometers, which I believe actually is the range of the AA, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so if it was a little bit above, so then when you get the concealment expert whatnot, then it's going to get it down to 5.2. So, upgrades for the vessel that I obviously recommend is your standard main armaments modification 1. Pretty self-explanatory. You want to keep your guns, want to keep your torpedo tubes, nothing out of the ordinary. In slot number 2 here, you have the choice of damage control systems modification 1 or engine room modification 1. I could flip-flop on either or. I think it's vitally important for cruisers, especially at low tier, to retain their engine and their rudder. And I would probably say that that's more so the way to go. But sometimes, I understand you're getting constant HE spammed or whatnot. It's incredibly frustrating to deal with, the cruisers and destroyers, sending you ablaze all the time. So I understand putting up with Damacon Mod 1 as well. Personally, if it's me, I would go ahead and take engine room protection. I think it's just more important, more vital for a cruiser to retain both those things rather than worrying about -3 and -5 for flood and fires. So. Obviously, with 6 guns comes aiming systems modification 1. Again, increasing your torpedo traverse speed 2 with 20% is crucial. So, vital. To me, it's a no-brainer. I mean, I could see main battery mod 2. To me, I mean, it's really not that big of a deal to deal with. Just have your guns pre-aimed in the right direction. I think it's fine. Consumable loadout, pretty standard. In my opinion, what you're going to pick up with the consumables. You do have access now to the submarine surveillance. This is kind of Wargaming's attempt to, balance submarines in the essence of, hey, look, there's more counters out there. In a Japanese cruiser, I find you're going to utilize, a heavy cruiser that is, you're going to find yourself less likely, or you're going to be less likely to find yourself in a situation where submarine surveillance is going to be useful unless the submarine is absolutely demented and stupid and overextends into your sub radar range. I think the Italian cruisers are going to be a little bit more, a little better in that regard, just because they have that fuel exhaust smoke, so they can remain, undetected while going after a sub. Whereas these things, I mean, you're detected by the sub, you could be pinging you. Battleships are going to have their way with you. It's just, to me, it's here. You have it. Don't rely on it. Don't think that your job's to hunt submarines, because it certainly is not. Captain build for the ship. This is what I run. Again, I'll show up on screen what I would recommend once you get a 20-point commander. The priority target. This is going to be your opinion as someone who is. This is going to be skill based. Personally, if I'm going to redo this, I would probably not take priority target, and I would instead just go ahead and grab incoming fire alert, because I want to take outnumbered, and I want to take my gun feeder skill. So this is what my captain build is going to look like once I'm done and I get a 21-point commander. If for you, I would probably say get rid of priority target. I would still pick up the outnumbered skill. I would probably take gun feeder. I'd probably take incoming fire alert. And if you have anything extra, swift fish. That's what I would do. makes the most sense. If I'm 1-2 over, then yeah, I just stick with the incoming fire alert. Don't worry about the swift fish. But yeah, I'll show up on screen. That's what I recommend for a 21 commander for anyone starting the game. If not, it just depends with the priority target. If you really need that to know how many people are targeting you with their main battery guns, by all means take it. Again, a cruiser that can affect the battle is a cruiser that is alive and not blown up. A cruiser that's blown up early in the game can no longer affect the battle and is you're not helping your team anymore because you're deceased. So pretty self-explanatory. So that's the Furutaka guys in a nutshell. With under the hood and some soft stats. Let's go into the gameplay footage so I can talk about what the Furutaka looks like in game and how she plays and how she performs. Alrighty, so here we are in the first battle with me and my div mate here in the tier 5 Japanese cruiser tech tree. Yep, not looking at premiums all the time. Tech tree cruiser, the Furutaka. So, obviously I went over and poured about the armor scheme and the stats on the Furutaka, but how does she actually perform in game, and how do you play her? And I was talking about earlier on in the video about how this ship kind of like lays the foundation for the IGN cruiser line. It's kind of cruiser gameplay 101 if you kind of boils down and kind of think about it. And that just boils down to the ability to read the minimap, read the deployment of the enemy, and responding accordingly to what they have. Obviously, tier 5, there are some heavy hitters out there like the Judo Cesare and the Agincourt, the Kitakazi, the Kamikaze, Fujin, those kind of ships. So you have to be aware of those ships always when you go ahead and play lower tier, just because you know that those ships are pretty damn strong. Some might call them broken. Some of them definitely are. So just be aware and make sure you read the team lineup screen first before you go ahead and the battle timer starts. So, but yeah, so me and my div mate, how do we play the Furutaka? How are you going to play the Furutaka? How are you going to get the most success out of playing the Furutaka? And I think the best one is go to a flank, and you're going to go ahead and lock that flank down, but you are not pushing in. A couple things you do not want to do in the Furutaka. You are not a bow tanker. Bow tanking is your last line, I would say last resort. It is your last resort, bow tanking, to mitigate damage. I would much rather you rip the band-aid off and do a full gamer turn 180 and try to time out the battleship salvos rather than go bow in. Your DPM's not good. You only will have 4 barrels nose in. It's not worth it in my opinion. You have to read the situation for sure. Knowing the enemy battleships when they shot or when they fire or whatever, knowing there's about a 30-second reload and whatnot. But you definitely have to read the map and the battle before you go ahead and make a decision like that. So again, we don't want to do that. We always want to go and sail in, and it's beginning to turn out. I see the Hawkins on this flank. I'm witnessing the Prince Eitel Friedrich. Obviously there's a submarine too. I'm already beginning my turn. And there's obviously a destroyer as well, the Leon. So I want to make sure that I'm already turning out. I'm turning out, and it's going to allow me to what we call kite. Kiting is sailing away, playing with my rudder, throttling my my throttle, whatnot, and just playing around with all this stuff so that basically I can throw off enemy salvos and just continue to shoot, have all my guns on target. Also, this plays right into my torpedo firing angles, like we've talked about, that I'm able to throw my 10-kilometer range torpedoes out in the direction of the ships who are hopefully trying to close the gap and target myself and my div mate. Now, again, the first game isn't going to be like both these games in total. They're not going to be anything phenomenal. I'm sure you can get better results, and I have gotten better results in these ships. But I wanted to especially highlight these battles because I feel like they do show a lot, like about how you're supposed to play these ships. And I think a lot of people in the community would agree with me when I say that these ships are very passive-minded opportunists that are all about your shot selection and when to fire guns, when not to, when to fall out. So that's why I call them a very good training ship. They're going to teach you the fundamentals of the game and how to play well, especially when it comes to cruiser 101 gameplay. And eventually, when you master these skills, it's going to translate and scale very well, and you're going to get even more out of these ships, in my opinion. Just know when you're going down this line, not necessarily at tier 5, when you start climbing up and other tech lines start getting more and more powerful, these ships, I think they lose a lot of their ability to be effective in games, whereas they are basically glorified HE damage spammy farmers, right? That's what these ships do. They do it well though. relighting targets on fire, as you see. And again, as you saw right there, switching to the armor piercing, which is extremely potent on these vessels. These are 203 millimeter guns. These are the same 203 millimeter guns. Well, not the same, but generally the same in regards to the shell caliber that you're going to be getting up at the tier 10, right? 203 millimeter guns, pretty standard for heavy cruisers in this game, and you already get access to them at tier 5. And from here on out, unless you choose to play a 155 Mogami, which again, I love personally, we'll get to that down the road, you're going to be carrying on the 203s throughout the line. The Furutaka is again, it is a great ship when it comes to setting fires. And does it rely on setting fires? Well, I would say there is to some degree. Yes, all cruisers probably rely on setting fires to some degree, unless you have an AP only ship. But yes, min-maxing the fire potential, not only that, but coupled with the high HE alpha strike for the cruiser line. And again, being able to be that kind of switching to AP and being able to punish broadsides too, again, is always awesome and is always great. So here's a prime example of making a conscious decision, waiting for the Agincourt to fire, realizing his guns were not trained on me. Kind of gambling with projectile Frederick's dispersion, which again, we won that gamble. The submarine pinging me, I'm immediately turning out, gonna throw my torpedoes in the general direction of where I think they might hit something. And yeah, and we're gonna continue firing our guns near, I would say, our max range, just because 13.9 is still pretty close. It's not really like anything too incredibly far away, right? But we don't want to sail into the sub. Yes, we have the sub surveillance radar, but a sub with any brain will realize that you have that and just continue to sail away from you, and he'll never be detected. So we're going to create distance a little bit. And now that we have incoming aircraft, which is going to be a great example to show you that this thing really doesn't have any AA whatsoever. I actually was amazed. My fighter was able to shoot down a couple incoming aircraft, which is always nice to see. Because usually those things engage and like, oh, we want to engage, we want to help you out, and they shoot down one of the enemy planes in the squadron, and they all of a sudden they're like, yeah, we don't want to do it anymore. We're gonna fly away and go land back on the vessel or whatever. It's like, Jesus, what a joke, what a joke that is. So, but yeah, our fighter pilot decided to actually help our ship and claim himself a kill, which is super nice. So. Yeah, so anyways, just continuing on, like I was saying, me and my divmate, we realized that there's a destroyer out here, a submarine, and then there's 2 battleships. Battleships being hard counters, obviously, to cruisers, especially at low tier where they just shit on cruisers all the time. It's definitely not a rarity to see 1 dev strike per game of a battleship absolutely nuking a cruiser. So keep that in mind too. Again, we're just throwing torpedoes in the general direction of whatever is spotting us, whatever is sailing, either the submarine or the destroyer, maybe even the battleships if they decide to get too close. But again, we want to keep distance. We want to continue to throttle juke and rudder juke them, adjusting our speed and continuously shooting our HE at the incoming battleships so that we can set them on fire and do some decent pen damage to them. So. Again, this thing does not disappoint. You'll notice this. You will set fires with these things. The problem is your fires per minute only being capped around like 4. You're not one of these fast firing light cruisers that you tend to see. I know the Omaha is a prime example of that. For example, you just don't have that with this ship. It's a completely different game design that you're getting and a gaming experience when you play the Furutaka. You're definitely more of a quality damage rather than damage quantity, if that makes sense. And that, again, that carries throughout the entire line. I think the fastest firing ship could be the 155 Mogami with the 10 seconds. But yeah, this is a big change from someone that's like a diehard Kuma fan. Let's say you love your Kuma. You're like, oh, so far I'm really enjoying these ships. Yes, they have a massive citadel, but, I like these ships. The playstyle really changes. And, some people even beg the question, well, is it better to play this ship like a battleship, so to speak? Pick your salvos, angle, right? And it's not a bad idea to kind of consider yourself more of a battle cruiser role mentality, thinking that, okay, well, I have good armor, I just don't have the damage per minute in this thing. Again, playing it like that might help you perform better in this thing. But yeah, look, one shell hit, one fire. It's awesome. And that was not a well shot, aimed shot whatsoever. So, but again, the reason we're showing this video, it's probably going to be pretty boring for you guys, but I'm trying to write home and get through to you that um, these ships are going to be best when they're playing at this range kited away. Me and my div mate are doing a really good job of doing this. Do we lose this game? Yes. But you have to ask yourself, what could we have done different? I mean, would charging in there and dying to these two battleships, sub and destroyer, worth it? No. I mean, I don't. I think we're kind of in a tough situation here too, especially after we choose to eliminate this submarine, which we both immediately just point our guns and click them with our HE, which is potent. And lucky enough for us, we end up getting the kill because of it, because of the high alpha on the HE, even with the sub saturation and all that stuff. Still allows us to eliminate him. Now, thinking, well, could our sub have gotten more aggressive, yada yada yada, that kind of stuff? Could we have turned the tides better like that? I don't know. I really don't know. It's hard to really say because I just feel like battleships are that strong, and not that the Furutaka doesn't have carry potential, but it's just you have to be smart and realize that battleships can click you, even with this thing's improved deck armor and whatnot. It doesn't really matter. It's still not our fight. And the way we're going to be most effective is at range, shooting HE and trying to set him on fire. So I know here I'm trying to circle back in to see if I can respot that Agincourt to see if he's going to be stupid enough to continue to push into us. Shocker, he isn't. He actually has a brain and he realizes that my div man and I are not out of the battle, but really defending the base and locking it down. He'd be more beneficial to his team if he went towards the middle islands and kind of quelling the remainder of our forces that are kind of, scattered about within the islands. So, the Furutaka, to another thing to write home about the Furutaka, and I've talked about it a little bit, is the AP. The AP shells are obviously they overmatch 14 millimeters of armor, standard ricochet angles of 45 to 60, typical fuse time of the 0.033 seconds. What I really like about the Furutaka though is once you start getting out there, and I'm just gonna say 14 kilometers, even though it can only reach about a 13.9. I mean, your penetration is still 159 meters or millimeters, and that's pretty good. And you're gonna see that is very potent and very strong. And the 203 millimeter battery, occasionally with these super light cruisers, like we'll see in the next battle when I show that, like the Agano, and like the Galicia, like these other ships that have are super super light, you will get overpens. That's how much penetration and big guns you have on these guns, or penetration you have on these guns. So you just have to play around that too and realize that it's going to happen. With the opportunist play style, you're going to have disappointments from here and there, and it's just going to be it's nothing out of the ordinary for people not to expect nowadays. But yeah, like I mean, I'm not going to show all this battle just because you realize that that this is very boring and bland. But basically, we end up losing this game. We ended up getting shredded just because the DD differential and CB differential. Even though our CB did try his best, it just Again, I want to show this this beginning of this battle just because it highlights the essence of the kite. And how to kind of play it at range and throwing torpedoes in the general direction of oncoming ships and just reading the minimap it's all cruiser 101 gameplay. So let's continue to look at the next battle here for us. All right, so here we are in the second battle. Again, it should be a little bit more action packed, though. I apologize that this battle does contain bots. Again, it's hard nowadays, and it's another reason why people don't like playing low tiers. I think is also because of the prevalence of bots, and you're going to see that. So I apologize, but again, I just want to show the ship in the background while I talk about her a little bit, kind of highlight something she does well. As you saw there with the first salvo of the game, an HE Citadel on a light cruiser like the Danye, which is I believe is tier 4. Nothing. It's definitely not out of the ordinary with a lot of these light cruisers that you're going to be fighting. I mean, you do have 34 millimeters of penetration. So again, knowing ships' armor thresholds, knowing about the 13 millimeters of nose and ass, this thing can 100% frontally Citadel ships. Okay, it depends again with the threshold of the Citadel. cruisers that have really weak, really light armor. So there's a prime example of switching to the armor piercing, brutalizing the enemy Phoenix with definitely the raised citadel out the water, just highlighting a lot of these things that you see that the Furutaka brings to the table. Here's an example on the, what is this, the Agano. I believe we do overpen with our AP, and we're at a range of what, I don't even know what this is, like 9 kilometers, 8 kilometers, somewhere around there. You'll see that even at that range, because we are bringing so much HE or AP penetration, where his citadel's at, boom, overpens. Nothing out of the ordinary. But if you land your shells right where they hit the water and they slow down the penetration a little bit, boom, there you get your citadels, right? It's one of those things you have to deal with these light cruisers, especially at this tier, but it transfers up to higher tiers too, if you're especially when you're in battleships fighting super light cruisers, and the battleships have super high penetration. Again, it's just something that it's a game mechanic. Play around it. I know it's incredibly frustrating, but it is there. So, and it ain't gonna change anytime soon. Let's be honest. Here's an example of knowing that the enemy destroyer to our right is there. Hopefully our bot doesn't run into us and kill us. So we pop our hydroacoustic search, which we have on this vessel, and we're going to see if we can spot incoming torpedoes before they land on our ship. We also know that there is a kamikaze lingering around somewhere in the middle of the map, so we're just going to throw torpedoes out there, maybe get lucky, who knows. These torpedoes are great for doing that, and sure enough, the Isakaze appears. So we're going to go ahead and pop our fighter to give us, I don't know if he's on fire, increase the spotting distance for our for his ship. And we're going to switch to the HE, and we're going to let him have it with this HE. I mean, what is that, 5 hits? 3 hits? 3 hits, 2 fires, and boom, eviscerate his HP. Nice of the bot shooting us with torpedoes. Thank God that there is no friendly fire anymore. 4 hits, we have another dead Isakaze. I mean, I wouldn't call this thing a destroyer hunter by any means. Just like, for example, I wouldn't call the Montecuccoli at tier 5 the Italian light cruiser, or like a Zara or a Trento a DD hunter. But can they both schwack enemy destroyers? Yes, one has SAP, one has HE, but yes, they're not going to be going out of their way. But as a cruiser, it is vital that you assist your allied destroyers in eliminating enemy destroyers. I think still to this day, destroyers, in my opinion, especially in games that don't have aircraft carriers, carry the teams. They are the workforce when it comes to the ships that have the most carry potential. And I think by eliminating the spotting for the enemy teams, or ships that can absolutely nuke other ships with torpedoes, it's huge. It's a huge scale. It's a huge asset. So even in your battleship, when you see battleship players shooting enemy destroyers, it is selfless, and it's just because they want to win the game and potentially earn more XP because they reward XP for eliminating and shooting at enemy destroyers. Definitely anticipating that the kamikaze launch torpedoes at us. It's always nice to have a massive gap for all of his torpedoes that we can squeeze through. But just paying in mind, he has a 40-second reload on his torps and some change on that. Probably with Adrenaline Rush. I'm assuming he's running his Shimakaze commander at tier 5. Like, that's usually what these people do. Just knowing that Adrenaline Rush is probably going to be helping that. So just make sure that we have an idea and angle around him. And anticipate where his torpedoes are going to go, as our hydro is still down for about another 70 seconds or so. Seeing the HE penetration work on that New York there, and the coupling with the fires is awesome. And boom. And there's the enemy destroyer. He pops up. We're going to keep our nose pointed towards him until we see where the enemy torpedoes are coming. That's 1, that's 2, there is 1 more. I don't know, did he not launch his last set? Probably didn't, because he got, well, there it is. So he launched all of his torpedoes within his torpedo broadside, so now we know we have the ability to swivel if we so choose. The reason I'm not swiveling is because I know he has a 5.5 kilometer detection, and I want to make sure that he is spotted. Right? So I'm trying to set a fire on him to increase his detection, break modules, break his engine, slow him down. I cannot have this guy getting away, because he's a big part of potentially of their team still coming back and winning this game, though it is unlikely. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and continue to fire him. Now, obviously, I know the New York was there. I was taking the gamble that he wasn't firing AP, and HE still breaks my engine and my torpedo tubes, or incapacitates them. It's going to happen, guys. And oh, there's a perfect example. 3 HE shells for what, over 4K or whatever that was. It was awesome. So to sum it up before I run out of time here again for you guys, hopefully these games kind of highlighted how to play the Furutaka, pretty much polar opposites, as I didn't really need to kite in this one because the flank that I went to either was full of bots or the ships died pretty early. So just know the difference between the two and make the appropriate decisions. So hopefully this little tips and tricks of the Furutaka will help you guys, and this review shed some light on just how awesome this tier 5 cruiser is. I certainly love this ship. I really enjoyed. I always go back and play her, obviously with my div main and everything. So you guys hopefully will love her too, and it makes it easier for you when you grind through her or return back to her and continuously play her. So, anyways, hope you guys enjoy the video, and I'll see you around on the next one, guys. Thanks.